The role of a wife is supposed to be taking care of the house and kids, right? As a wife, you're considered a failure for pushing that onto your husband. If caregiving is your priority, then you should also be able to manage your household duties properly. In response to my mother-in-law's harsh words, I was at a loss for words. It seemed she couldn't accept her son, Ryan, taking on housework and childcare. How do you think you're able to live like this? Don't forget that it's thanks to Ryan's salary. You really don't know how to be grateful. While being scolded by my mother-in-law, Ryan did not try to protect me. Despite also earning an income, my mother-in-law insisted it was all thanks to my husband. I was recently put in charge of doing the laundry. I'm not a service staff. I was busy and asked Ryan for help, and he silently supported me then. But it seems Ryan was harboring dissatisfaction. You earn less than me and yet act this way. If we ever get divorced, you won't be able to get by on your own with our daughter. I could no longer bear the harsh criticism from my husband and mother-in-law. I am Ashley, a 30-year-old company employee. I met Ryan during college, and that's when our relationship began. We both started to work and, being at the right age, proceeded to get married. Eventually, our daughter was born, and I changed jobs to escape irregular working hours after giving birth. Now, I work full-time in a job with less overtime. It wasn't apparent until I got married, but it became clear that Ryan highly prioritized his mother. In every decision, he always sought his mother's opinion. Even when choosing a new home, I was surprised he brought his mother along. Should we choose this apartment because it has a spacious living room and is convenient for shopping? I suggested. Yeah, but what do you think, Mom? He replied. I didn't know why he prioritized his mother's opinion over mine. This place gets little sunlight, and I think there are better options. Indeed, I was thinking the same, Ryan said. Despite it being our living space, his mother's opinion influenced the decision. As a result, after viewing several, we chose a property that his mother was satisfied with. I liked it too, but a part of me wasn't fully convinced. When choosing furniture or appliances, his mother was always there. Why don't just the two of us go next time? Your mother must be busy, I suggested. I wanted to choose freely, without her. She's free to help, which is great, and I like getting her input. Ryan said, not understanding my desire to avoid his mother's intervention. Sometimes, Ryan would say he didn't need dinner, spending time eating with his mother at home. I was grateful since I didn't have to prepare his dinner due to my job, and I didn't see it as a problem. His mother must have been happy to have her son visit, and I didn't feel it was my place to comment. I just didn't want to upset my husband or mother-in-law or be disliked by them. Years passed since our marriage, our daughter grew, and we began planning to build a new house. Ryan is usually gentle, never complains, and plays well with our child. I hoped for a peaceful new home for our family of 3. Mom is getting older, so what about living together considering her future? Ryan suddenly suggested cohabitating with his mother. His mother probably wanted to live with her son and grandchild. To be honest, I was strongly against living with my mother-in-law. She always disregarded my suggestions, requiring me to be considerate not to upset her. She's overprotective of her son, and I realized I was an inconvenience to her. Living together would mean seeing her daily, which I wanted to avoid at all costs. But she prefers to live near her current home, right? That's true. She has friends there and dislikes being too far away. My mother-in-law doesn't want to move from the area she's familiar with. If we choose her preferred location, it'll be too far from my workplace. My commute would double. I wanted to live in an area that's convenient for work and raising children. How about this area? It's close to her home by train and near a station. What do you think? I showed Ryan several property options from a real estate agent. I found a property in an area blessed with lush parks and convenient for shopping around the station. Though we live separately from my mother-in-law, the fact that she's within an easy visiting distance was a deciding factor, and Ryan agreed. I was relieved we could avoid living together. However, my mother-in-law had started to visit frequently. Ryan welcomed her, and he couldn't turn her away. I understand her love for her granddaughter, but my daughter didn't get along with my mother-in-law and always cried when she saw her, which worried me. I wanted to relax on my days off, but I couldn't settle down with my mother-in-law's visits. Hey, can't we just spend time alone as a family on the weekends? I end up being on edge when your mother is around. She's part of the family, too. It's your choice to feel that way. Ryan didn't empathize with my feelings. Every time my mother-in-law would visit, she would criticize my cooking and cleaning, calling it raising a wife. If I hadn't cleaned, she would frequently inspect everything in detail. Working full-time, I planned to clean earnestly on weekends, but often my mother-in-law would visit during those times. It was unpleasant to be pointed out exactly where I was planning to clean. You still haven't mastered the basics of cooking. At this rate, you won't improve. Yes, I'm sorry. Even the meals I put effort into didn't seem to suit her taste. I agree. Even the soup is too salty every day. The soup my mom makes is just right. Ryan agrees with my mother-in-law's opinion and criticizes me too. It's frustrating that he only becomes assertive when my mother-in-law is around. Even though he's usually quiet, I tried talking with Ryan when my mother-in-law wasn't there. If you have any complaints about me, please tell me directly. It doesn't have to be when your mother is here. That doesn't help when it's just something that came to mind while talking with mom. Ryan became slightly sulky and disgruntled. It's often difficult to convey my desire for solidarity as his spouse. Disputes concerning my mother-in-law became frequent. When our daughter reached elementary school age, I received news from my mother that my father was unwell. Since it was difficult for my elderly mother to care for him alone, I decided to assist at my parents' house whenever I found a gap in my work schedule. During that period, I had Ryan look after our daughter. Our daughter began to help with household chores proactively and was becoming independent. Her willingness to support me, busy with caregiving, was encouraging. One day, my mother-in-law visited and confronted me with harsh words. Why has it come to this? I heard you've left all the child care to Ryan. I'm sorry, Mother. My father is unwell, and caregiving was urgent. I believe we should help each other when a family member needs support, but my mother-in-law seemed to have a different view. The role of a wife is supposed to be taking care of the house and kids, right? As a wife, you're considered a failure for pushing that onto your husband. If caregiving is your priority, then you should also be able to manage your household duties properly. I was at a loss for words to my mother-in-law's intense words. It seemed she couldn't accept her son taking on housework and childcare. How do you think you're able to live like this? Don't forget that it's thanks to Ryan's salary. You really don't know how to be grateful. While being scolded by my mother-in-law, Ryan did not try to protect me. Despite also earning an income, my mother-in-law insisted it was all thanks to my husband. I was recently put in charge of doing the laundry. I'm not a service staff. I was busy and asked Ryan for help, and he silently supported me then. But it seems Ryan was harboring dissatisfaction. I understood my mother-in-law's anger. However, I felt it was intentional. My situation became tougher as I juggled housework, childcare, and caregiving, and Ryan's attitude towards me became stricter. I want to do household chores whenever possible, but when I can't, I need help. I wish you'd at least take care of your own things. I understand it's challenging to care for our child, but I at least expected him to manage his own stuff. What? It's the wife's job to take care of the house. Why should I have to do it? Can't comprehend. Is this your excuse for neglecting household duties? Ryan didn't show any willingness to understand my plea for cooperation. You earn less than me and yet act this way. If we ever get divorced, you won't be able to get by on your own with our daughter. Due to the fact I had to change jobs, my income decreased, and now I earned less than Ryan. I chose a job with less overtime because our daughter was still young. Ryan had been making unrealistic demands, showing me a completed divorce form. If caregiving is so important, clean the house perfectly before you leave. Ryan intentionally demanded impossible things from me, who worked full-time. Even when I was tired from work, neglecting dinner preparations was not allowed. Don't you think the variety in your cooking is lacking? Stop trying to get by with stir fries all the time. And I won't eat side dishes bought from the supermarket. I was asked to prepare complex home-cooked meals, and because of that I was getting more and more mentally and physically fatigued. Later, when going to my parents' house, I decided to take my daughter with me. I stopped expecting anything from Ryan, who made harsh demands. I tried not to care about him and reduced the care I provided. At my parents' house, my mother adored my daughter and always welcomed our visits. My daughter loved her grandmother and looked forward to playing with her. I'm happy you visit, but don't overdo it. I worry when I see you tired. My mother was sensitive to the changes in me. Don't worry, I have Nicole's help, so it's easier for me. I always felt guilty for relying entirely on my mother. During that time, my father, whom I was caring for, passed away, and my mother and I discussed the inheritance amidst our grief. My father was in fact a wealthy man, owning several properties, including this luxurious home. The house was vast, old but well-maintained, and still habitable. It was the place where my parents lived together. I remember Ryan being impressed by the luxury of the house when he came to propose. The location was convenient for transport and in a highly regarded resort area. The area, boasting rich nature and open views, held special meaning for my parents. I thought my mother would continue living here, but she said, "This house is too big for one person." Indeed, managing this large mansion might have been difficult for my elderly mother. In the end, I took over the house, and my mother moved to a convenient apartment purchased with the inheritance. After my father's funeral, sorting through his belongings and dealing with the inheritance, I spent time in the mansion with my daughter while progressing with work. I relied on my mother and daughter for shopping, and while I was working alone, my mother-in-law and Ryan suddenly appeared. "What brings you here so suddenly?" I asked, and my mother-in-law, while touring the house, said, "I heard you inherited this splendid house. It's spacious, so there's enough room to live together," she said. "What?" I asked back, not understanding what she meant. "From now on, we'll live here together. I'll properly train you to be a wife," my mother-in-law declared cheerfully. Training to be a wife? I almost laughed at those words. I looked them straight in the eyes and said, "Wife? But I'm single now." "Huh? What are you talking about?" They were puzzled by my words. I filled out the remaining part of the divorce form and submitted it, so we're technically no longer related. "Unfortunately, there's no wife for you to train anymore." "What? How can you think that's acceptable?" they said. The moment I announced the divorce, their faces showed astonishment. They probably didn't expect me to actually file the divorce form. It's not about whether it's acceptable or not. Ryan signed the divorce form himself. It's unacceptable for a wife to defy her husband so brazenly. My mother-in-law exclaimed angrily. Shortly before my father passed away, I had actually filed for divorce with the form that Ryan had been using to threaten me. Even while caring for my father, Ryan didn't offer help and continued to trouble me. As a result, my love for Ryan disappeared. I tried to discuss the divorce, but neither Ryan nor my mother-in-law took me seriously. After my father passed away, I lost the chance to talk to them. My anger towards my mother-in-law's words exploded. Just because I'm your daughter-in-law doesn't mean I should obey everything. A daughter-in-law is not a slave. It doesn't matter what my mother-in-law thinks anymore. I am no longer her daughter-in-law. What are you saying? Don't think such an attitude is acceptable. My mother-in-law shouted. Enraged, she lunged at me, shouting. I tried to resist, but my mother-in-law's overwhelming strength subdued me. "Stop it! Let me go!" I screamed, but my mother-in-law, furious, yelled, "How dare you get a divorce without consulting us?" Disregarding my son, I pleaded for Ryan's help, but he didn't move, stunned by the fact of our divorce. Feeling the situation was out of my control, I contacted the police. Even as the police arrived and I was explaining the situation, my mother-in-law's anger did not subside. When an officer grabbed her arm to calm her down, she reflexively swung her hand, hitting the officer's face. My mother-in-law was restrained and taken to the police station to settle the matter. Ryan just watched in a daze as his mother was put into the patrol car. I will demand compensation for the mental damage I've endured. All the evidence is recorded. How what? Ryan was confused, unable to utter a word. Without his mother, Ryan was helpless. I will take custody of Nicole, so you will need to pay child support. Without my mother-in-law's support, Ryan just hung his head. Sometime later, my ex-husband visited my workplace. Apparently, an unfavorable rumor had spread through an old friend from college. So, your wife left you? It sounds like a mother-in-law problem. I feel sorry for your wife. Feeling the piercing stares at work, he said he quit because it became unbearable. His hair was disheveled and his beard was unkempt. I was shocked by his unsightly appearance. I heard that he turned to gambling due to stress and was financially struggling. Additionally, my mother-in-law also habitually played slots, and his new job's income was insufficient to support them. You're being a nuisance for coming to my workplace. You don't reply to my messages, that's why. I wanted no more involvement with my ex-husband or mother-in-law. Could you please reduce the child support? I'm having financial difficulties lately. The amount of child support was agreed upon by both of us. You said you wanted to do what you could as a father for our child. My ex-husband clicked his tongue irritably and glared at me. The situation has changed, so it can't be helped. My new job's salary is low, and there's hardly any bonus. My ex-husband could live adequately if he refrained from gambling, but he was trying to reduce the child support. I felt no sense of responsibility as a father from him. I know it must be hard to make a living for the both of you with your income alone, right? Hey, why don't we give it another try? I was appalled that he was proposing remarriage over financial issues. His pretense of kindness only infuriated me more. What, you want me to marry you again? I'd rather not with someone who's a mama's boy. How dare you? My ex-husband, who was not aware of his dependency on his mother, reacted strongly to my words. Without your mother, you can't decide anything, can you? From choosing a house to furniture and appliances, you always consulted with her. That's not true. Despite my ex-husband's objections, there was still so much more I wanted to convey. And your clothes, too. You chose them with your mother. That's what people generally call a mama's boy. My sharp words left my ex-husband unable to hide his agitation. He may pride himself on being a good son, but from my perspective, he's a typical mama's boy who can't make his own decisions. You always laughed at my lower income, but I won't allow such comments anymore. What does that mean? My efforts at my new job have been recognized, and I've received a promotion. I've been promoted, and now my income surpasses yours. It's impossible. There's no way you earn more than me. Ryan doubted my statement. He always took pride in his higher income and belittled me. He must have never considered the possibility of his wife earning more than him. You don't have to believe me. I can show you my paycheck anytime if you want. I spoke with confidence, and Ryan fell silent. I have also inherited assets, so I can live comfortably without my ex-husband. My husband can't force house chores upon me, and there's no nagging from my mother-in-law, which is very comfortable. Then, could you share the mansion and properties you inherited with me? I should have some rights to them. I explained Ryan's unreasonable demand. Inheritance is not considered joint marital property. I'm sorry, but you have no rights to it. Damn it. It's all because you filed for divorce. I did nothing wrong. It seemed Ryan couldn't accept the reality of our divorce. If you did nothing wrong, why did you agree to the divorce then? Did you help me when I was overwhelmed with caregiving? You didn't help at all. That's because you didn't do the house chores properly. I was too busy to even have time for that. Shouldn't spouses support each other? Ryan, who lacked to support me as a spouse, caused my love for him to fade. He likely doesn't understand that he wasn't there for me when I needed support the most. It's unfair for me to bear all the household and child care responsibilities alone, even though I'm working too. What are you talking about? House chores and child care are a woman's duty. You're wrong to burden your husband with them. Without reflecting on his actions, Ryan raised his voice. His views probably won't change no matter how much we discuss it. These are probably deep-seated teachings from his mother. Ryan, causing a disturbance in front of my workplace, was eventually escorted away by security. Ryan and his mother's financial situation eventually worsened, and they had to let go of their home. Moving to a modest apartment, they somehow managed to continue paying living expenses and childcare. Yet, they still couldn't refrain from gambling and lived a difficult life. Despite being busy with work, I'm happily living with my daughter, supported by my mother. My daughter is also delighted to see me smile more often these days. Once living cautiously around my ex-husband and mother-in-law, I now want to live true to myself and set a good example for my daughter. I have the responsibility to raise her alone moving forward. My experience with my ex-husband has deepened my understanding of the importance of a parent's role. I'm committed to teaching my daughter the values of compassion and mutual support, aiming to overcome any challenge with a smile. I have no intention of being with someone like you. Don't rely on me anymore. You are just a waste of resources. Stop leeching off me. I cannot forgive this. To think that I dedicated myself to you for over 20 years. Although I was furious at my husband's words, the possibility of divorce seemed surprisingly favorable to me. Make sure you won't regret leaving me. Haha, don't be ridiculous. I don't want someone like you. You will understand in time. I will make you regret what you said. Just you watch. I am Gina, a 54-year-old housewife. I have been married to my husband, Danny, for over 20 years. We may seem like a happy couple on the surface, but that is not the reality. We are just a couple on paper, unable to divorce and merely living together. The man who was kind during our dating days changed after marriage, becoming dominant at home. I feel that our children are the only thing that's still holding our marriage together. Our son, Aaron, was born a year after we got married. Aaron grew up to be a smart, cheerful, and kind child was the happiest event in my marriage. However, I did all the parenting alone. My husband never involved himself in parenting or even housework. It's a miracle that our son grew up so wonderfully despite these circumstances. My husband was very strict from the beginning. He demanded that I become a stay-at-home mom and manage all household chores perfectly. I was surprised, and from the day we started living together, he spoke to me in a commanding tone. We met at a mixer where he, 4 years my junior, approached me aggressively. I prefer older women, probably because I like to be pampered. Gina, you are beautiful and have a strong character. Honestly, I fell for you at first sight. His active pursuit easily won me over. Our relationship was very fulfilling. He always made thoughtful date plans and put me first, which I appreciated. He might have seemed somewhat frivolous at first glance, but he was surprisingly serious inside, and that contrast drew me in. Our relationship went smoothly, and about a year and a half later, he proposed. I want to spend my life with you, Gina. Will you marry me? I was overjoyed and accepted his proposal. The moment I gazed at the ring he gave me was a moment of happiness. After the proposal, we proceeded with the formal introductions to our families, and it was only then that I learned that Danny's father owned a business. The revelation that he was the president's son surprised me. You see, people sometimes approach me for the money, so I didn't tell you so that I could get to know the real you. He explained. I see, I responded. Although the way he expressed it may sound somewhat degrading towards women, this may be a problem unique to wealthy families. I didn't take it to heart. However, I was glad I passed his trials and was happy that it resulted in marriage. He recognized that I wasn't after his money. My in-laws, whom I met for the first time during our marriage introduction, were very warm people. We are truly grateful that you are marrying Danny. Gina, you are genuinely kind-hearted. It's wonderful that you are older. Danny still has some immaturity, so an older wife is good for him. Please take care of our son. Danny laughingly said, Mom, Dad, don't treat me like a child. What are you talking about? You're still a child. What? I couldn't help but laugh at the conversation between Danny and his parents. My father-in-law, the president, was extremely humble and polite, and my mother-in-law was kind, cheerful, and had a charming smile. I was happy I was able to become a part of this family. After the meet and greet, we had a grand wedding. Being the son of a business owner, the groom's side had a diverse group of relatives and colleagues. The venue was spacious, and the wedding was glamorous. My friends and family praised and described it as a celebrity-like wedding. After the wedding, we went on a honeymoon to Italy. It was his choice to visit Italy, but we toured many tourist spots and were moved by the deliciousness of the local cuisine, especially Italian food. It was so good that I felt everyone should experience it at least once. The honeymoon was a memorable and happy time, but it might have been the last happy period in my marriage with my husband. After returning, we started our new life together. Although I became a housewife at my husband's wish, after marriage, his demeanor completely changed, suddenly becoming overbearing. Listen, I'll give you money for living expenses from my income, so I want you to manage it well. I understand. I was unable to hide my confusion at his sudden change. What's on the menu for tonight? I made grilled fish today. I can see that, but I really want to eat meat right now. Why did you prepare such a simple dish? I'm sorry. Just order delivery. Why delivery? It would take time to start cooking now. Quickly order delivery, and I want steak. Danny would not eat the meal I prepared if he didn't like it, opting for delivery or asking me to cook something else with available ingredients. This always enveloped me in sadness. When we ordered delivery, he wouldn't pay, so I had to manage with the living expenses he gave me. However, the amount he gave me was insufficient. Our apartment rent was $700, and he only handed me $1,000 each month. Consequently, I had to cover food and utility bills with the remaining $300, which was unrealistic. With his unreasonable demands, the expenses often exceeded the budget. The excess was covered from my savings, which was the status quo. While I was trying to save up diligently, Danny freely spent his earnings on things he liked. Purchasing expensive brand items and going to drinking parties were typical examples. Seeing him buy and enjoy whatever he wanted made me feel extremely frustrated. After our child was born, it became even more difficult to support the household with just $1,000. So, I suggested to Danny that he should contribute more to our finances. Can you increase the money you put into our household budget, at least a little bit? Huh? Why? I told you to manage with the money I'm giving you, he replied. But it's not enough. That's why I'm asking. No way. I can oblige. It would reduce my spending money. What is he talking about? I'm utterly disgusted having a husband who still doesn't want to spend money on anything other than himself, even after our child was born. Then, please allow me to work part-time to earn some money? What? I can't allow that. You would obviously neglect house chores. I won't do that. With the living expenses you give me, I can't even provide enough food for Aaron. I don't want to raise our child in poverty. What? I'm the future president. Show some respect. Then make a choice. Put more money into the household, or allow me to work. Which do you prefer? Fine, as long as you promise not to neglect the household chores, a part-time job is okay. Eventually, Danny agreed to let me work outside. It took way too long to get his consent. Having to explain so much was indeed a taxing effort. Afterward, I started working as an office assistant at a nearby company. Having years of work experience allowed me to smoothly secure the job, which was a relief. From there, my busy routine began. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, first preparing lunchboxes for my husband and myself. Then, I did the preliminary preparations for dinner and finished cleaning the bath and toilet. By the time Danny woke up, I served breakfast, sent him off, and quickly washed the dishes. Next, I took our son to daycare and then rushed to my workplace. My work ended around 3:30 p.m., after which I picked up my son, did some shopping, and returned home. Since I completed most household chores in the morning, I just did some cleaning and laundry in the afternoon, starting dinner preparations to have everything ready by the time Danny returned. Although I hardly had any rest, I was satisfied knowing my son was eating healthy meals. The interaction with my son and his smiles healed my fatigue. Danny hardly participated in housework or childcare, but I didn't have high expectations from the start. Nevertheless, a part of me wished he would spend more time with our son. In the end, Danny never showed any interest in parenting. Despite his overbearing behavior at home when in front of his in-laws, he acted as if he's really close to me and my son, which made me see him as a coward. I was initially worried that my in-laws might be like Danny, given his drastic change from our dating days. However, when we visited them after getting married, they treated us with the same warmth as before. They cared for my health and showered Aaron with love. They were completely different from Danny. I felt much more at ease at my in-laws' house than with Danny. Gina, do you have any concerns? You've just started a part-time job, and with childcare and housework, it must be tough. Feel free to talk to us if you need anything. Thank you, but I'm fine for now. That's good to hear. Please come and visit us anytime. We're always happy to welcome you. I truly appreciate your words. The kindness of my in-laws has been a great support for me. Over time, Danny became increasingly harsher. He started coming home later, and the number of days he skipped dinner increased. While most would find this lonely, I actually found relief in his absence. The house was much more peaceful when he wasn't around. The time spent alone with Aaron was indescribably restful and tranquil. When Danny was home, he tended to be aggressive towards me, depending on his mood, and often got irritated for trivial reasons like crowds during unexpected outings. If that was the case, it would have been better to just relax at home from the start, but I could hardly say that out loud because he got furious when I voiced my opinion. I didn't want my son to see his father's behavior like that, so I complied with my husband unless it was completely unreasonable. I made sure to educate Aaron well during our time together, aiming not to pass down Danny's values. As a result, Aaron has grown into a wonderful person. Visiting my in-laws with Aaron while Danny was out seemed to have positively impacted Aaron's growth. The interactions with my kind and understanding in-laws have positively influenced his character development. Thus, I focused on parenting without relying on Danny. Time swiftly passed, and my son grew up, enrolling in a prestigious high school known for its academic rigor. Naturally, he was also aiming for university admission. This meant significant tuition fees would be required. I've been diligently saving a portion of my part-time income to fully support my son's future. Thanks to this, I wasn't worried about which university he would choose to attend. In his final year of high school, my son shared his plans for his future education. I would like to go to a university in Boston, but the tuition and the cost of living alone will be quite substantial, right? While he openly discussed his aspirations, he was also considerate of our family's financial situation. My husband, as usual, was not keen on spending much on the household and was negative about educational expenses. Despite taking over the business from my father-in-law and having an income, he was reluctant to invest in his child's education. However, I had anticipated this situation and saved accordingly. Don't worry, there's no need for you to make any sacrifices. I've saved for your tuition and living expenses. Mom, thank you so much. I'll study hard and get a good job to repay you. That's reassuring, but first, you need to get into university. Yeah, I'll do my best, he replied, smiling with hope. Dedicated, Aaron focused on his studies and was accepted into his desired university in Boston, a proud moment for me as a parent. Mom, I did it. I got accepted. Wow, that's amazing. We joyfully found his number on the online acceptance list. Danny, being off work that day, became curious about our celebration and inquired, "What's the excitement about?" He had forgotten the previous night's dinner conversation about the announcement of university acceptance. Anything not of interest to Danny seemed to go in one ear and out the other. Aaron got into the university he wanted. His hard work paid off, and we're really happy. I responded with a smile to my husband. Feeling happy and moved, Danny asked, "So, which university is it?" When I mentioned XX University, Danny frowned and said, "Why bother going to a university in Boston? It's a waste of money." I was truly disappointed by his reaction. I can't comprehend how one could not be happy about their child's growth and success. He seemed to have completely forgotten what I had said, and our conversations didn't resonate with him at all. Didn't I say I would pay for the tuition and living expenses? Have you forgotten already? Huh? Did you? Danny seemed to forget family matters as soon as they were mentioned, showing little interest in us. Why do you forget about home matters so easily? Think about your family a bit. I couldn't hide my irritation when it came to our son, likely a buildup of my frustrations with him. At my angry words, Danny became indignant and retorted, "Who do you think you are? Who do you think provides the food you eat?" I replied calmly, "I prepare the meals and I wash your clothes so you can go to work well-dressed. Don't underestimate housework. Why don't you try handling everything yourself then?" "No way. I earn the money, so I don't need to do the housework." Danny seemed a bit taken aback but then stormed out in a rage. "Aaron, I'm sorry our supposed fun time got spoiled by the argument with your father." "It's okay, Mom. Thanks for standing up to Dad." Wanting to change our mood, we decided to visit my in-laws to share the good news about the university acceptance. They were thrilled and took us out for Italian to celebrate. Aaron enjoyed the Italian meal immensely, and I was glad we visited my in-laws. Their happiness filled me with joy too. However, Danny didn't return home for several days afterward. It's not hard to guess what he was doing or who he was with. I suspected he was with another woman, but at this point, it didn't bother me at all. I'd rather he do as he pleases. His infidelity was evident, and his facial expressions and reactions made his feelings transparent. He lacked the talent to hide it. and his suspicious behavior was conspicuous. I had hired a detective before and gathered evidence, planning to divorce him when Saren graduated and started working. I was quietly waiting for that moment. But an unexpected event occurred. My father-in-law suddenly passed away. Having suffered from high blood pressure for years, he died of a stroke. I rushed to the hospital upon receiving the call from my mother-in-law, comforting her while waiting for the treatment to end. But unfortunately, my father-in-law didn't make it. I tried contacting Danny multiple times during this period, but he didn't respond. Finally, through his company, I managed to reach him, and he came to the hospital. Is it true that Dad has died? Why didn't you inform me immediately? Danny demanded. I tried contacting you many times. But you didn't notice, I replied. Then you should have contacted the company sooner, he said. I felt angry at his response, but arguing wasn't helpful in this situation. We needed to focus on preparing for the funeral. However, Danny suddenly received a call saying, I'll leave everything to you, and left the hospital. I was left there, astonished. How could he be so indifferent even though his father had just passed away? I couldn't understand it. There were so many things to do, like supporting my mother-in-law and discussing funeral details. Danny might have been busy, but he seemed to lack compassion for his parents. I gave up relying on him and started preparing for the funeral myself. When I contacted Aaron, he immediately came by train to help. My father-in-law had been a company leader. Therefore, we had to notify his colleagues and secure a funeral home of appropriate size. Despite the overwhelming tasks, with the help of Aaron and the company's people, we managed to hold the funeral. What upset me was that Danny, despite leaving everything to me, declared himself the chief mourner. Typically, my mother-in-law would have taken on that role, but she was too submerged in grief to fulfill it. It might be tough for Mom to be the chief mourner right now. I'm the president, so I'll take charge of the funeral, he said, and began acting as if he had orchestrated everything. But what mattered most was giving my father-in-law a proper farewell. My concerns were about my mother-in-law. My in-laws were a wonderful couple, deeply in love with each other. It was evident that my mother-in-law deeply loved my father-in-law. Thus, the sorrow of losing a lifelong partner was indescribable. After the funeral, my mother-in-law's health rapidly deteriorated, and she began visiting the hospital frequently. Half a year after my father-in-law's passing, her health worsened significantly, necessitating hospitalization. I immediately went to the hospital and took care of her admission procedures. I visited her daily, asking, "How are you feeling, Mom?" "I'm stable now. Your visits give me strength. We were happy to have you join our family, Gina. I'm grateful for the long marriage you've had with my son. Mom, I'm truly sorry for the trouble my son has caused you. I never thought he would turn out this way. I wonder where I went wrong in raising him." She lamented. Danny did not visit her sick bed, and he rarely visited his parents' home even when my father-in-law was alive. Moreover, he showed no interest in her medical expenses, which I took upon myself. I avoided discussing this matter with Danny. If I had, he would likely have been bothered and might have made unnecessary or inappropriate comments. I thought it was best to avoid trouble by not raising his interest. So, I continued to balance work and home life, visiting my mother-in-law daily. One day, upon returning from the hospital, I found my belongings scattered in the yard. "What is this?" I wondered in confusion. Rushing inside, I found Danny standing there. "Welcome back. You've finally returned. What is this? Why are my belongings outside? I'm kicking you out of the house." "What? Why? I can't stand being with you anymore. We're getting a divorce." "A divorce? I don't want to be with someone like you. Don't rely on me anymore. You're just a waste of resources. Stop leeching off me." Danny said this with a sneer. I had reached my limit. I had devoted over 20 years to our marriage, only to have it end up like this? I felt intense anger at his words. But divorce might also be a new beginning for me. "Make sure you have no regrets," I said. "Ha, I won't have any. I don't need someone like you," Danny responded. I decided to observe how things would unfold from here. I intended to make him retract his words soon. I picked up my belongings scattered in the yard one by one and took them to my new residence, where I planned to start my post-divorce life. This was a plan I had prepared in secret. In fact, I had inherited a significant amount from my grandfather before getting married. After the death of my grandfather, a wealthy landowner, I inherited a considerable fortune. While a portion went to my father, a significant amount was passed down to me as well. I had kept this fact hidden from Danny. Just as he had concealed his background, I too kept my grandfather's wealth a secret. My parents lived a modest life as civil servants, independent of my grandfather's fortune. I chose to live independently but also invested my inheritance to grow my personal assets. I had enough wealth to live a leisurely life, but I maintained the appearance of using my part-time earnings for my son's education expenses to avoid Danny's suspicion. Since he remained unaware of my wealth, my strategy seemed to have been going well. After moving out, I visited Danny again, handed him the already filled-out divorce papers, and asked for his signature. "How do you plan to survive? Will you live on the streets?" He scoffed. "No need to worry. I have a new place to live," I replied. "What do you mean? How can someone as incompetent as you have a place to live?" He was perplexed. "The divorce was part of my plan. You mentioning it just made things easier for me." "Impossible. After all I've done to support you," he exclaimed. "Say what you will, but you will pay compensation for your infidelity." "What? I know everything. Here's the evidence." I said that while showing him the photos proving his infidelity. Though he turned pale, he retorted, "Don't think something like this will shake me." "No problem. Let's discuss this through lawyers from now on." Humph, he was clearly agitated. Eventually, the divorce was finalized, and I received the compensation. However, Danny's troubles were far from over. "What is this? Why am I receiving bills for Mom's medical expenses?" Danny's sudden call echoed. "The issue was about my mother-in-law's medical expenses. It's only natural. I've been paying them so far, but as her son, you should be responsible." "No way. I wasn't informed about this." "Well, now as her son, you should make the appropriate payments." "That's ridiculous. I've already lost my position as the president." "Oh, how sad. It's your fault." "No, it's not. I just informed your mother about the truth." What are you saying?" She was outraged to learn that you had neglected your family and had an affair. As the primary shareholder, she decided to remove you from the presidency. "That's impossible." "Mom betraying me? She would never do such a thing." "No, you're the one who repeatedly betrayed her. Don't blame her." "I don't know about any of this." "Where are you living now?" "In some cheap apartment." He speculated. "Quite the opposite. Let me show you." I responded, showing him my house via video call. Seeing the interior, Danny seemed lost for words. "What's going on?" "Such a grand house. This house costs $3 million. $3 million. How could you afford it?" "Like you, I come from a wealthy family, but I kept it a secret. I bought this house somewhat impulsively to prove that I'm superior to you. It's a valuable investment, and Aaron can live here after I'm gone. I can't believe I'm inferior to you." Danny was crushed. I managed to give him a taste of his own medicine, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Eventually, it seemed like Danny was abandoned by his affair partner, probably because his only aspect was him being the president. She was likely just after his money. Driven by a sense of competition with me, despite his lack of assets, Danny ventured into a new business. As expected, the venture failed, leaving him burdened with significant debt. Now isolated, with no support from his son or mother, I heard he's living in poverty, working part-time jobs to pay off his debts. I decided to take over my mother-in-law's medical expenses. She had been a great support to me, and with my revenge on Danny complete, it wasn't an issue. Moving forward, I plan to cherish the time with her, regularly visiting with Aaron. Aaron has grown into a responsible adult, securing a good job. I'm pleased to see his matured appearance and demeanor, feeling proud as a parent. I'll continue to support his journey through life. My hope is to cherish my son, parents, and mother-in-law while continuing my investments and work,